edition. We're still working out the technology. So, good afternoon. And welcome to Detroit Public Library. Today, the Detroit Public Library Author Series is proud to present a discussion on the classic novel, The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Sam Greenlee was a highly acclaimed, internationally known poet, novelist, playwright, screenwriter, producer, director, actor, and teacher. His most popular novel, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, is a literary classic that remains popular today. Greenlee's daughter, Natiki Hope Pressley, will be in conversation with author Oneita Jackson as they discuss the new second edition of his seminal work and its continued impact on Black America. Just want to let you know that the books are for sale right in the back there by Source Booksellers, and that we will be signing books up front once the presentation ends. So, without further ado, Ms. Pressley and Ms. Jackson will start the discussion. Thank you. Hello.
Oh, Christine, I don't think the mic's on.
No mics, hold on. They were supposed to turn those on for me. Hello. All right.
Yep.
Detroit, it's good to be home. A lot of people don't know I moved to Chicago.
You can move it in front of you too if you want. Yeah.
I'm sorry about the sound. Yes. Okay. Anyway, I'm glad to be home, and I talk so much about Detroit. You all please give a big Detroit welcome to Natiki. We're going to start with the reading. She's going to start reading, and I want to know before you start, how many of you read the book? How many of you read the book when it came out? How many of you saw the movie? How many of you are eager and ready to ask her questions? Because I have a lot to talk about, but she wants to hear from you all. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, Natiki Hope Pressley.
All right, good. I'll get close.
Just you can move the mic up and around if you want the bass up here. Yeah, there you go.
Make sure y'all can hear me.
Yeah.
This is better.
Yep.
All right. Well, first, thank you, Detroit. Thank you for having me. As I've mentioned to several people, this is my first time in Detroit. I know it's crazy, but I'm so glad to be here, and I'm glad that this is the first time that I'm visiting to continue celebrating my father and his legacy, and that you all are so willing to come out and hear from me in honor of my dad. He would be very happy to see all of your faces. So thank you. So I was actually glad to see that many of you had already read the book. But for those of you who read it a long time ago, and what, 30 years, 50 years maybe ago when it first came out. So I love y'all for still being here and still supporting. So 50 something years ago, I said 30 because I wasn't sure how long ago you read it, but if it was 50 years ago, thank God for you. But we are going to read a little bit from the book. And the reason why I wanted to do a reading is because I really wanted to refresh everyone's memory about some of the parts of the book that were really important. And like Oneita said, I'm here to hear from you. I know y'all love to hear me talk, and I can, but I want to hear from you. So if you have questions, and that's a part of this day that I'm more excited about than anything. So I'll set it up real fast.
Where are you reading from?
Yes, I'll set it up real fast. Thank you, Anita. I'll set it up real fast. So in the beginning of the book, if you recall, how many people remember the beginning of the book? What happened in the beginning? All right, so yeah, the beginning of the book introduces a conversation with a senator who is talking to his staff, and he is talking about his campaign for re-election. And in that time that he's talking to his staff, he realizes that one staff member mentioned that he's not doing well with the Black vote. Okay, we know how that sounds, right? You're familiar with that. So he's not doing well with the Black vote. And so he's looking for a way to improve his standing in the Black community. Does that sound familiar? So he decides that the best way to do that is to integrate the CIA, right? He wants to really stick it to some of his friends in the government, really, and said, let's integrate the CIA. So that's the setup of the first part of the book. And then at the second part, the second chapter, from which I'll be reading, is when we start to get a chance to meet Dan Freeman, who is the main character. And what I want to start, let me go back a little bit, because I want to first say what the book is about. Let me give you an overarching description of the book. This book is about a man who was born in the ghettos of Chicago. He ends up being a part of a recruitment program to integrate the CIA, and he becomes the first Black CIA agent. He takes the knowledge that he's gained from the CIA, and he then goes back to his community in Chicago, and he raises up a Black militia through youth gang members, and he fights back, trains them in CIA about the CIA training and all the things that he's learned in order to fight against oppressive institutions, right? So he is essentially a man who goes to the CIA, infiltrates the CIA, comes back, and then teaches everything that he learns to his community. Okay, so that's essentially what the book is about. Here's chapter 2, and I think one of the reasons why I wanted to read from this is because the way that my father wrote books is so descriptive, and you get caught up. It's very, he's a lover of blues, and you can definitely see that in his writing because it has rhythm, right? And it's always so enjoyable to read. And I wanted you to hear a little bit of that, and then we can talk. Anita and I will talk a little bit, and then we want to hear from you. Is that all right? Y'all with me? Y'all staring at me like I'm not a celebrity. We here talking. Okay. So here's chapter 2. The beginning of chapter 2 says, Freeman watched the class reunion from a corner of the common room of the CIA training barracks.
This is a great moment for you all to put your devices on silent or
Vibrate.
vibrate. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. I'll start from the top. This is chapter 2. Freeman watched the class reunion from a corner of the common room of the CIA training barracks. It was a Black middle-class reunion. They were Black bourgeoisie to a man with nepotism personified. In addition to those who had recruited themselves upon receiving notice that the CIA was now interested in at least token integration, 5 were relatives or in-laws of civil rights leaders, 4 others Negro politicians. Only Freeman was not middle class, and the others knew it. Even had not dressed as he did, not used the speech patterns and mannerisms of the Chicago ghetto slums, they would have known. His presence made them uneasy and insecure. They were members of the Black elite, and a product of the ghetto streets did not belong among them. They carefully ignored Freeman, and it was as he wished. He had no more love for the Black middle class than they for him. He watched them establishing the pecking order as he sat sipping a Scotch highball. It was their first day in training camp after months of exhaustive screening, testing, security checks. Of the hundreds considered, only 23 present in the room had survived and been selected for preliminary training, and constantly reminded of it since they had reported they transposed and preened in mutual and self-admiration. To be a Negro firster was considered a big thing, but Freeman didn't think so. Man, you know how much this 12-year-old Scotch cost me in a commissary? 3 bills and a little change. Chief Henry Gal, as long as I can put my mouth around this kind of whiskey at this price, I'm in love with being a spy. You know, they call the CIA agent spooks. First time we'll ever get paid for that. Man, the fringe benefits, they just don't stop coming in. Nothing to say of the base pay and stuff. We get it. We got it made. Say, baby, didn't we meet at the pen relays a couple of years ago in that motel on the edge of Philly? You remember that chick you was with, Lurleen? Well, she's teaching school in Camden now, and I get a little bit of that from time to time. I'm gonna skip over to some of the things that are uncomfortable.
Wow.
I'm gonna skip over a little bit of the things that are uncomfortable, just in case you have children. You know. So now, man, don't freeze on me. I'm married too, and you know, Laura Lee, don't give a damn. I tell her, I saw you when we get out of here. Where'd you go to school, man? Fisk? I went to Morris Brown. You frat, Q? You got a couple of brothers here, those 2 cats over there. What you majored in? What your father do? Your mother working too? Where your wife go to school? What sorority? What kind of work do you do before you make this scene? How much bread you make? Where's your home? What kind of car you got? How much you pay for that suit? Got your own pad? Or you live in an apartment? Co-op apartment? Tell me that's the new thing nowadays. Clue me in. You got a color TV? Component stereo? Or console? Drop those names. Doctors I've known, lawyers, judges, businessmen, dentists, politicians, and great Negro leaders I have known. Drop those brands: GE, Magnavox, Ford, GM, Chrysler, Zenith, Brooks Brothers, Florsheim, Johnny Walker, Chivas Regal, Chivas Regal, excuse me, I don't drink. Jack Daniels, imported beer, DuPont carpeting, wall-to-wall drags, and split-level lines, remote control, TV souls, and credit card hearts. Play Who Do You Know and Who Have You Screwed? Blow your bourgeois blues, your nigger soul sold for a mess of materialistic pottage. You can't ever catch Charlie, but you can't ape him and keep the gap widening between you and those other niggers. You have a ceiling on you and yours, your ambitions, but the others are in the basement, and you will help Mr. Charlie keep them there. If you get out and move up to your level, then what will they have? What will they have? So in that section of the book, I read that because I think one of the things that we don't talk about as much as it relates to this book, and Anita and I will be talking, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but the book is not just about a man who trains a militia in Chicago to fight against oppression. This book is also about not just the external challenges we face as racism and such, but the internal challenges we face in our own community. In that section of the book, we dealing with each other's stuff. Where you go to school, what's your name, what's your mama name, what you do, how much money you make, what kind of car you drive. And honestly, that we still do that, don't we? And we don't do it that obvious, but we do it, right? And so in addition to the challenges that he has to deal with, and we all have to face outside the external challenges, we also have to face the things that are right here in our own communities, right on our doorstep. And so what I love about the book and what my father did was he explored all of that. Just in one book, he's exploring, dealing with the issues of identity, dealing with the issues of social status, the issues of racism, right? And dealing with the issues of, classism, ageism, a host of other things in this book. And so I had to read that part because of that part. Chapter 2 really opens the door for some more conversation that he'll have in this book about that very topic.
Thank you, Natiki, for doing my job. I have to cross off these check marks now because you have answered. But Natiki has answered a lot of the questions I had, you all, so we will move on quickly and get to what you all.
You can go home now.
What you all want to do. I am a writer, I'm a satirist. We went to Howard together, so that where you from stuff. Natiki's from New York, y'all, which is why she had trouble trying to mimic an up north accent, if you will. One of the questions I have as a writer, specifically a satirist, is how much of this book is real or memorized? Because your father was in the military, right? He served in special, I don't know what the proper classification is, but a lot of people, I want to know how much was real. You sat at his feet. Tell us, please.
Well, so that question comes up a lot because the book, for those of you who read, the book gives a lot of detail, very specific things that most people wouldn't know had they not had specific training. So lots of times that question comes up. My father served in the United States Information Agency through the Army. which is no longer in existence. But I believe that the U.S. Information Agency was also connected to espionage activities, specifically for agitation and propaganda. So I guess if we could give an example, it would probably be, you know, kind of like what's in his hand and then go over here. So U.S. Information Service, go ahead and make them think we're doing something over here and then we'll go do something else over there. So my father served for many years in the Army. So I would say this, the book is semi-autobiographical. There's certain parts of this book that are real, and I don't know what you mean by real. These are all his real feelings, by the way.
Facts.
So,
Know them.
but some of the things that are in there are definitely real in terms of some other things other assignments that he had along his journey. Yes, that was a good question.
Thank
You're so
you.
welcome.
I want to know how Wayne State University Press, and we have a representative here. Thank you, Tracy, for being here.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you did not know, the second edition of the book was released in June, correct, of 2022.
Yeah.
And we all know it was a revolutionary book at the time. It still is. It's continuously been in print, and there's 1969, it's about 53 years, and it's still in print and still selling out.
Yeah.
Spectacles has it, Zana at Spectacles has it, Source Booksellers have it, everyone's buying and rereading.
Yeah.
So one, I would like for you to talk about its relevance today, after you tell us how Wayne State acquired it.
Well, Wayne State has had the book for many, many years, back in the 80s, I believe. And they published it back then. It had been published first in the UK before it came to the United States. Initially, when he tried to get it published in the US, they rejected him at every publishing house for reasons that we could understand, especially in the 60s. We didn't want an agitator, right? So he was able to publish it over in the UK. And Margaret Bugsby, who had the foresight, saw that this was going to be a great opportunity for her to publish a book that was really important, published it in the UK, and then it came here in the US. But Wayne State has had this imprint for many, many years. We did a second edition back in June to commemorate my father's legacy, to celebrate him. I wrote a little bit of an introduction in that, but I wanted to have a new conversation. I wanted to revitalize the book. I wanted to talk about this again. It was too important to just let it die somewhere in a bookshelf. So that is the reason why we did the second edition and some other reasons, but for the most part, that was the reason. We just recently celebrated my father's birthday back in July in Chicago.
With the proclamation.
Yes,
of St. Greenlee
yes,
Day,
Greenlee
yes.
Day in Chicago. It's a big deal, it's a big deal, and we were excited that they were acknowledging him and celebrating him. So, yeah, so that's the reason why the second edition is out, and Wayne State has been an incredible partner in doing that.
Now, I would like to read from Natiki's introduction. When my father wrote this book, it was a shadow of his own life, a personal revolt against racial injustice, police brutality, and economic disenfranchisement. That was 1969, right? And it's still pertinent. And I don't like the fact that this book is as relevant as it is right now. It's like, what kind of growth? We have growth, but the prescience of Mr. Greenlee at that time is amazing. Spook is his termination letter to institutional racism and a clarion call for true liberty and justice for all. This was his valiant effort to encourage our heroes in the fight for social change and a willful discharge from the societal disease caused by the undeniable promotion of inequality and injustice in America. One of the themes, and there's so many in this book, you touched on identity. Their identity, judgment, and assumptions abound in this book. One of the things that struck me, and you tell us about the onomastically named Dan Freeman, right? And his sense of confidence all throughout. He was being challenged at one point, and what was it? The jujitsu person just told him straight to his face, "I don't like you," and he said, "I don't care for you either." And with no expectation that he would be reprimanded, or talk about his confidence and your father's confidence and how Mr. Greenlee was as a man. Before you answer, how many of you were blessed to have met him? Nobody met Mr. Greenlee in this room? Okay, so you have my question, the confidence
Yeah.
of Mr. Freeman and your father.
Well, there's a parallel between my father and Dan Freeman, right? And there's certainly cross section between, what they both believe and stood for. But in terms of my father's life, if you haven't met my father, that's okay. Go to YouTube and put in Sam Greenlee. I promise you, it'll be a roller coaster ride for you. My father was an expert in choice words. Yes, I don't know if you can be an expert, but he was. He loved to share his true feelings with various ways. And so his heart for Black people is essentially why he wrote this book. The Spook Who Sat by Door is a love letter, right? It's his love message to all of you. It's his way of telling you that you don't have to shrink back, right? There's ways in which, we've had numerous conversations. Every time I talk to people, we talk about what it means to be a Dan Freeman in these days. What does that look like? My family and I coined a phrase, spookability, or we say spooking. Because what I think we have all fell victim to, and sometimes without even understanding or realizing it, is that we've been told how far we can go, where we can live, right? Even to the extreme of what we should think about ourselves. And so I think my father was trying to use this book to tell you, people that he loved the most, is that you don't have to shrink back, and there is a way to fight back. I don't want to give all of it away. This is not a closing meeting, y'all. But I want to say that the book has an incredible way of encouraging people. My father's confidence came from the fact that he lived his life the way he wanted to live it. Whether you liked it or not, whether you liked him or not. And he did not ever submit to corporate structures in any way, in any form. And I'm not telling anybody else to do that, because I work for several people, so. But I think he felt that it was important for him to have his voice and it not be muffled by anybody, by any position or title, because as you all know, in this country, it's wonderful to rise up the corporate ladder, but the higher you go, the less you can say. Am I telling the truth?
Yeah.
Okay, make sure I'm in the room, right? I'm in the room, okay. So the higher you go, the less you can say. And so he never wanted to submit to that. He always wanted to use his voice. And I think he did in this book. He was able to share what he believed, what he hoped for us as people. This is not literal. I don't want y'all all to go and train people in your communities to be a Black militia and get guns and take up arms. No, I'm just kidding. But I do want you to know that there is an arsenal that you have available to you. It's not a literal arsenal. And that's what you fight with. And that's what my father wanted to communicate. So I think I answered the question, and maybe I did something.
You did.
Okay.
One of the things I want you to talk about too is there's the contemporary references to your father's book,
Yeah.
Snowfall, and the New York Film Festival. Right now, Elvis Mitchell has a documentary coming out. I apologize, I left my notes at home. That's how prepared I am. But there's a documentary coming out and it's running at the film festival right now. And it mentioned your father's book is in it. I can't wait. It'll be on Netflix sometime. This is October, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be on Netflix sometime this month, and I
Right.
cannot wait to look at it. So tell about the snowfall references and other references that we don't know about. Like, you're here to give us information we can't Google.
You can Google this stuff, but I will certainly share. It has been incredibly exciting for a book that's 50 years old to appear in a show that just aired a couple months ago. And it was an incredible reference. I don't know how many of you have watched any of the episodes of Snowfall, but I believe it's in season 5. Am I right? Anybody know? Okay, it's all right.
We'll Google it.
Google it, right? But there's a season where the main character, his father, gives him this book to arm him and say, I need you to read this book because of the challenges. I don't know if you ever plan to watch Snowfall. But Snowfall is about, and I can't remember the actual person's name, but it's based on a real life person who actually was one of the people responsible, and correct me, anybody if I'm wrong, because I could be, but I believe it's one of the people that was responsible for bringing crack cocaine into the community starting in Los Angeles, California. And he was literally working with the CIA. The CIA hired him to help them fund a war. If y'all don't know about this, y'all should read about it. Okay. And so his father had been a member of the Black Panther Party and had given him this book because every former Panther I've met has read this book. Gave him this book and said, I need you to understand what you're up against. I need you to, and perhaps I think, there may have been, had there been more seasons, had it stretched out a little bit more, may have been some kind of, some reference to the book and how that book influenced him. But yeah, that reference and, I believe the rapper who's no longer here, Nipsey Hussle, had also said he was going to have his last album called The Spook Who Sat by the Door. The references are used quite often. And, and I'm so surprised. I guess I'm not surprised, but I'm honored, and it's humbling because that's my father who wrote a book so many years ago. I don't even know if he knew the impact this book would have and how many years, even after he's gone. He's been gone since 2014. And still, we are still talking about him. So thank you all for allowing us to do that.
Speaking of which, so as I said, Natiki and I went to Howard together, and there has been a tremendous, I think, burden. You can talk, this is not 2 minutes, placed on her. My mouth was wide open when I read Mr. Greenlee's obituary in the New York Times, and I had known her 30 years, and this is his daughter. And it's been, now she's out into the open, you all, so please, hug her, whoop whoop her, because I cannot imagine this solemn place she's had to live all these years with no one knowing who she is and this tremendous legacy. And she's too humble and modest, but I'll tell you about her a little bit later on. Now, one thing I would like to ask you, and regarding cultural references, I read a book and there was a chapter called The Spook Who Stood by the Door.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So anyway, can you confirm or deny? Let us know. I heard that The Spook Who Sat by the Door is required reading somewhere in the DMV at a very big agency, a 3-letter agency. Can you confirm that?
I cannot.
CIA, FBI, they have to read this book.
Well,
I heard that.
Yeah. When my father made the film, so the book was written in 68, 69, and the film came out about 71. Yeah, and because of the controversy and the details of instruction, which the film shared, the book was taken out of the theater. I mean, the film was taken out of the theaters right away. I remember, Teresa actually told me, someone called me and said, look, we were talking about the book, and she said, I went to see the movie, the film. It was like she was in college, and I'm just, Teresa Stovall, she's wonderful.
Oh, Teresa.
Yes. So she told me that she had, and I wanted to refer to her name because I don't like mentioning people. If I can say their name, I like to. But she had mentioned that she had seen the film when she was in college. And she was like so excited, and she went and ran and told her friends. She was like, y'all gotta see it. So, usually when you tell someone to go see a movie, they don't go see it the day of. They go, oh, when I get a chance, I'll go check it out. And they tried to go check it out, and it was no longer in the theaters. And she said she was just so disappointed that they weren't able to see it and share the experience. But yeah, the book is required reading. I was told, and I have read as well, for a 3-letter agency. Yes, 3-letter government agency, but I can't say which one, but I will say it is. I've heard. So I've heard.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. A lot of us had to read the book in college. I did. Did anyone have to read it in college? Okay, so what I want to know is, upon your secondary, tertiary reading, when did you first read it? And then what have you learned, and what would you like for us to get in 2022?
That's a lot, yeah.
Okay, so upon rereading, what have you seen now that your younger party self, Howard University?
You telling my business.
You don't have to confirm. I'm partying with you.
Yeah.
But we had to read it, and there's a different understanding, the nuances, nuance is serious in this book,
Yeah.
especially with the writing. But tell us, what would you learn? What have you learned? What would you like for us to know in 2022?
When did I first read it? That's hard to say because I'll let you in on some family stories. Since y'all came out, y'all like family now, so we can talk. But my father would send me a copy of the Spook Who Sat by the Door every year for my birthday. And then he switched up to Baghdad Blues for like Christmas. He'd alternate. So yeah. So I think when I first saw a copy in my house. I was small, and I didn't know what the book was about. It was a hard copy with like a black cover, black and white cover. It was actually the one that we saw in the library, the Johnson Publishing Library in Chicago. And it was just too much of a book for me. I was a small child, and I just thought, oh, that's something that my parents have in a library of books. And the second time was when I got it gifted to me for my birthday. I was still kind of like, oh, I'm not gonna read it because he keeps sending me this. I was kind of saying, what else is he gonna send me for my birthday? But by the time I did get a chance to read it, I want to say I was a teenager in my teens. And I think it was great that I did open the book at that point because I was young enough to understand, young enough to read it, but also old enough to understand what I was reading. But it didn't have the impact then that it did when I was later in my 20s, when I started hearing more people talk about it. And it's interesting that Oneita mentioned this burden that I carried with my father being Sam Greenlee. I just never had a need to talk about that. It just never came up in conversation. You walk up to people, it didn't. You walk up to people, you go, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Oh, hi. Yeah. Oh, did you know I'm Sam Greenlee's daughter? I know you didn't ask me, but so it never really was something that I thought, yeah, I'm being honest, in all of my time, yeah, it was not a conversation. I never said, oh, I know we're watching the movie, because we did it at Black New Force. And I was like, I know we're watching the movie, but I'm not gonna tell y'all that's my dad, because then y'all gonna start asking me questions.
And you should have let us know. You should have let us know that.
We're having a private moment, y'all, sorry.
Anyway.
I never felt the need to at that time. I just really didn't. And so by the time I actually read the book where it had, an impact on my heart and also changed my perspective. Also, it changed my relationship with my father. Let me say that very because people had talked about him, you know, I used to attend a lot of events with my mom and my dad, you know, would come into town, and he would be speaking here and there, and he would invite me to come. And people were making such a big deal about him, and I was like, I don't get it, you know? But I do now, I get it now, so, yeah, I don't wanna say it was a heavy burden, but I certainly felt like the timing was perfect. I don't think there was a need for me to talk about it earlier, but by the time I got old enough to talk about it, like we're doing now, I think it had more impact and certainly affected me in a whole different way, so, yeah.
Okay, it is almost 2:45. I have 3 things I want to say, and then she will listen to you. I'm just gonna sit back and take notes. So one thing I want you to do is to talk about your memories of your father and, you know, your fond memories that people may not know, and then maybe the Pretty Willie moment or your experience in Chicago and the soundtrack. If you all don't know, Herbie Hancock, that was, I think, the 3rd soundtrack that he had produced, and I prepared by listening. I like to listen to that soundtrack. It's jazzy, okay? So, and then we'll open up to you all, because please tell your experiences. I need some more paper.
Okay, so repeat.
Oh,
What did you say?
memories of your dad, talk about the music,
Mhm.
and Chicago, if you would like, and I'm done, I think, I'm officially done, because you all report.
Yeah, well, memories of my dad. I think I got a chance to talk a little bit about his heart with people. And, my dad would walk around Chicago and bike ride around Chicago. He was a tall, over 6 foot man, slim forever. I mean, he stayed slim, and he walked and rode a bike, public transportation from time to time, but not all the time. And no matter who you were, if you walked and say, "Oh, do you stay in Greenlee?" And he would stop that bike and he'd pull out his books, or he would, you know, have a conversation. The running joke in Chicago is always that people would say, "Oh, you know," he'd be like, "Oh, yeah, you wanna buy my book?" He usually would sell Baghdad Blues out of his bag. And he would tell people that, the book is free, but my signature is $20.
Baghdad to read from.
I did not. Well, I have it, but I didn't like prepare. There's so much in Baghdad to read, but, so that was a running joke. My father always had a book on him. He always was selling his book, his DVDs out of his bag, out of his satchel. So he was the kind of person that would talk to anybody at any time. You know, there was never any conversation too small or too big for him. That is certainly one of the things I admire about him most. He was well known in his community. People knew exactly who he was, but they always had a chance to talk to him. So that was a special part of who he was. As far as our relationship, you know, my dad was a complicated man. He's a complicated man. And I want to say that in a loving way, not complicated where it was a negative thing, but he was a writer. He was a thinker. He spent a lot of time in silence. And he likes to sit in quiet or sit with jazz music playing. And just, I mean, he's very much Dan Freeman. If you read the book, you know, those moments where Dan Freeman was kind of chilling in his apartment, playing some music, you know, describing kind of the environment around him. That was pretty much how my dad lived and loved to live. But my memories of my father really were about conversations that we've had. But I'll be honest with you, what I loved the most was spending time in quiet with him. Spending time just watching him do what he does. Watching him write, listen, read, stare out into the open. We're very much alike in that. I'm an introvert as well. So we would spend hours sometimes just sitting quietly. He would write, I would color my coloring book. Those are really wonderful memories of mine that I wish I could still have today. I don't think I would be writing in a coloring book. I might pull out a coloring book for memory's sake. But I think I would love to just sit in his presence again, in those silence and that quiet. Yeah, it was very powerful. It was a very powerful exchange, even though there was no words. Yeah.
Okay, I'll start. So tell us about, do you recall your father's process of writing? Right, I'm delivering a lecture. Let me just talk to my girlfriend, y'all. Okay, so look, Tiki, I am delivering a lecture Tuesday at the University of Michigan about great first sentences and how compelling they must be because you're competing for the reader's attention. When you read this book, today, the computers would tell Senator Gilbert Pennington about his impending campaign for reelection. So in 2020, I don't know how that might have been if you all read it in 1969, but I'm reading it in the, what is this?
2022.
Right, 2021, 2022, and it resonates with me differently. Then there were the nuances of Mr. Greenlee's humor. If you cheated and watched the movie and did not read the book, you have to read the book because I was on the floor laughing. There's a point at which I think it's in the first chapter, and he's talking about Sediti Negroes, and he's also talking about, oh, here we are. He's talking about not driving, one of his colleagues not driving their good
Yes,
car. And at some point, it reminds me of the first law of power. It was essential never to have a more impressive car than one's boss.
Everybody know that rule of the job.
And then there are some other places, and then in chapter 2, the first sentence of that chapter. Freeman watched the class reunion from a corner of the common room of the CIA training barracks. As you read, it was a middle class black reunion, and then at the end. So I don't know how you all want to do it, right? Just talk. We can just have a conversation. Because you all are here, yes. Patrice, former amazing librarian. from the
Please
Detroit
stand up so I
Press.
can see you if you don't mind
I know
standing.
someone
I would love to
because of
see you when you
her.
ask
Thanks for
questions. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. I'm
Oh.
delighted to be here. And when
You
Oneita,
can come take this chair.
oh my God.
This is on.
We're having a heart to heart. Come on, sit down.
Yes, yes.
Catherine.
Oneita, your text message, told me she wanted to be in town, why? I was floored. I was so amazed. My question is, as you were growing up, were you aware, a lot of times people have like a circle of people that they draw energy from. Were you aware, did you have a circle of go-to people? Did you sense any of that or witness any of that?
Yes. I can't say the names of those people, but I will say that he definitely had an inner circle of people, people that he trusted and relied on, to share. And I think that's just for any creative, I think that's very important to have, right? Just like myself, I mean, I'm like I said, my father was an introvert, so you wouldn't learn a lot about him personally in meeting him. He'd talk about anything you want to talk about, but you wouldn't learn a lot about his personal life unless you ask the direct questions. But the people surrounding him knew a lot about him, a lot more than I'm sure he wanted to share. It was his safe place. So he absolutely had a group of people, a close network of people that he relied on, even up until his dying day.
It's evident that he really enjoyed music, so, yeah, I know you can't mention names, which I understand that. But did they include like musicians, other writers,
And some of those people were before my time. I know I look, I don't know how I look anymore. Sometimes I look young, sometimes I look, I don't know, it varies, it's day to day. But I think that his the crowd of people that you might be referring to might have been before my time. My dad passed, he was 83 when he passed, and he had me late in his 30s. Well, in his 30s, yeah, late in his 30s and 40s, I can't remember now. But he always loved Chicago. It was his beloved place. It was his safe place to go. It was his default. He could travel anywhere in the world, and he would always go back to Chicago because that's where his hub was. That's where his heart was. And that's where the people he loved. He mentions a lot of those people in his book that I'm going to be releasing later in his memoir. So you get to read a lot about some of those people that he had in his inner circle. and people who he loved. And, you know, there's a great history of art and music and, you know, coming out of Chicago. And a lot of those people were friends of his, people he went to school with.
Thank you for your.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you.
Thank the library for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hot seat, come on, you don't have to sit down, you don't want to sit in the seat, you don't have to. It's up to you. You decide. See, you don't need. Okay, this is Detroit, I guess you do it.
What's your name, sir?
My name is David Stone.
David Stone. Thank you, Mr. Stone.
I remember in the '70s watching the Today Show with Brian Gumbo.
Okay.
And he was doing a special over in Egypt,
Mhm,
and he spoke about the Sphinx.
mhm,
And he let out some very important information for the world to know, particularly Black folk. Because when I think of Brian Gumbo at that time, he appeared to be very deferential.
mhm.
I mean, in terms
I
of
got you.
wanting to be accepted by white folks.
Mhm,
But for him to say that there's data indicating that the Sphinx goes back 200,000 years, I thought that that was very interesting for a statue built by African Black folks
mhm,
to be that old.
mhm.
We know that, you know, Dr. Natiki has said that the oldest human on earth goes back to about that time, and that we are the original people.
Mhm,
And it's important for us to appreciate what type of people that we are, highly developed, cultured people with all types of talents
mhm.
in terms of architecture, farming, building, thinking. When we think about the Egyptian mystery schools
Mhm,
that the Neophytes went in to spend 40 years of intense study so that they could become out of it at the other end as a master.
mhm.
But you know, if we've all seen the Woman King, we get an indication that we're not only an educated, highly developed people, but we're fierce.
Okay.
And we understand that at the deepest emotional level.
Mhm,
So we are self-preserving.
mhm.
We have a strong sense of who we are as a people in terms of self-awareness and self-protection.
Yeah.
And my question to you is, you know, you were talking about the Panthers. Did you ever meet Geronimo Pratt
I did
and
not.
Peaches?
I
Well, I
not.
did.
Okay.
I met him right around 1971
Mhm,
in Inglewood.
mhm.
I saw him, I went to see that person right next, pretty much next door to me. And I asked him the question, why did the government make you an example? Why were you in prison for so long?
Mhm.
He gave me the answer that he was not willing to go along with being a dispenser or a distributor for drugs.
So, Mr. Stone, did you meet Mr. Green ever?
No,
Or
no,
commercial?
no, no, I
How
didn't.
many points about the book?
No. Well, I did see the movie,
Okay.
and my point is to bring it home and bring it on down,
Mhm,
is the fact that your father was placed in an agency where he had to learn the whole methodology,
mhm.
and he got along to get along. But then after he saw what was happening, he turned into. That's the impression I got. And so, you know, like Huey P. Newton, who was offered the same opportunity and went along with the government.
Mhm,
And as a consequence, he met his downfall because of that.
mhm.
So my point is, in terms of what our agenda should be today, we have to make a decision. Are we going to maintain a individualistic, self-centered, egotistical position for our life? Or are we going to relate to our families and the community and to our nation with more of a collective mentality? Because we're in a very important time period in terms of our very survival, which means that we've got to get beyond self and understand that we are in a free fall. And if we don't understand that we're vulnerable
Mhm.
and that this is the time to prepare in terms of food protection on all levels, we're gonna be in a very bad position. So what is your opinion about that? What should we be doing in terms of either doing both agendas of working on ourselves, being concerned about ourselves, and the other end of the continuum, reaching out to the community and do all we can? What do you think that we should be doing to reconcile those two dualities?
Thank you. Thank you. That is a great question, and I'm sure that requires a whole lot more than just a short answer, and it certainly deserves that. I don't want to say that I can tell you what you should be doing, what we all should be doing, but I will say that we're living in a very interesting time. I'm trying to be really careful what I'm saying, but I think what Mr. Stone made a great point about preparation. And I think if you're paying attention to everything that's happening around you, you're watching the news and you're being diligent, and really trying to understand what's happening in the signs of the times, I think that you'll start to say to yourself that you've got to start planning some things, right? You've got to continue working on yourself, of course. And I think the first place we should start is with ourselves, of course, and with our families. And I think that it's clear and it's evident right now in these times that we're living in a time where values, our original traditional values have been, thrown away. We're no longer interested in our own communities and our family. We've separated ourselves and we've isolated ourselves, and we made it about us and who we are and our elevation, where we're going. And, well, I got my bag and whatever. I don't even know what the kids are saying. But we're focused on the wrong thing. And so we're being distracted over here while they're stealing from you over there. And so I think Mr. Stone makes a great point, is that pay attention to what's happening over there. Right? Because we're all over here like, I'm trying to do me, I'm here. The invitation wasn't good, was it? I'm out here, and there's nothing wrong with, with that from time to time, as long as that's not the life you're living. But if all it is about what you're getting and not what you're giving, then your life is in vain. If your whole life is about what you got and not what you gave, then what were you here for? And I think that's primary. And my father gifted us. That's why I was saying that his gift was to give us something that we can read and send to generations. My grandson is going to read this book as soon as he can read. He's 15 months, y'all, but as soon as he can think of a book, I'll be like, okay, chapter 1, buddy. Right. So we're passing on tradition, and we lost that tradition of passing information on. That's another thing. Families are dying, and we just never ask grandma anything about her life. We never talk to people anymore. And I'll say, I'll raise my hand. I don't think I've been doing a great job as well as I could have. I think coronavirus, I still got coronavirus brain or something. But I think that we've moved away from what was really important to us, what made us special, which is why everybody hates us so much. But they taught us to hate ourselves so that they wouldn't have to work so hard. I'm probably saying too much. I know this is being recorded. I'm always uncomfortable, like, okay, so rewind and delete. I'm just kidding.
You had a more response opinion to.
Yeah, come on up before I go too far. And I can't get back.
What's your name?
Well, how you doing? My name is Greg Sims.
Hi, Sims. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. So I'm a first, admit that I'm only halfway through.
Okay,
So my answers could be later on in the book, but that's just.
Okay.
Absolutely.
sure.
So it's kind of a two-part question. The first part is, given the kind of, that the father lived in and where he was, which, and knowing about that kind of area, kind of how, the government kind of viewed that area. And seeing how the Earth Day came through in the 60s, according to we looked about 73, and how they kind of started to kind of pick off. So probably in May, like I said, after that 9, after King 7, Malcolm X 5. So given that and what he wrote, was he ever at a point like, for example, saying that, you know, that part, like, you know, ever since this out because of the fear of what's in here, it was can be duplicated so easily, because it's pretty much the nice people, hey, y'all, you wanna come out and just read this book and have at it, like, give the time to look at the ball worldwide with. So did he ever say that you know of that, maybe you should, maybe wanna try to put stuff, maybe not, don't come out with it because of out of fear of dislike or family dislike as a result of the book that he wrote?
No. Oh, no, I don't believe that he ever was afraid of that at all. My father lived a very meticulous life. He was very thoughtful about everybody around him, people around him, even me. And so although we spent time together, he was very clear about how much time. Because he was, you know, this book made him a target. I mean, let's be honest, right? And he was very careful to be thoughtful about that fact. And so that if something did happen to him, that it would only happen to him and not the people that he loved. And so, you know, he was very thoughtful in that regard, but no, he was never afraid to put this out for fear of his own life. My father would have gladly died for what he believed, gladly.
Okay. And, all right, so, what that part is, I've seen, earlier a few of the books about other races in America that took this same playbook, where they went to the army, came back out, and they pretty much branched out to kind of like train others in tactics, warfare, and now they're pretty much assaulting the nation because of what they've learned from the government, and they pretty much take that same game plan that's in this book, and they're using it, but it's kind of like not brought to the forefront because of their color of the skin. And it's kind of funny that this book kind of is the same thing, but because of the skin color of who are doing it now, it's kind of just like ignored and not kind of even brought to a national standpoint of being viewed as because of that particular identity. So it's kind of funny how it kind of turns out for the other side of the coin. So that's pretty much it.
Oh, absolutely. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you so much. Yeah, there are different rules for, you know, there's a rule for us, a rule for everybody else. Clearly you can, storm the Capitol, and everybody survives for the most part. There's that part.
So we're officially done with the broadcast, and we're here until 4:00, correct?
Yes, or both sides. It's supposed to be the author. Right, so, unless you just wanted your question to be on the internet, I'm about.
If you have a question, come on, man, don't be shy.
But you'll be sitting right up there and, signing. And you guys can meet with her, but I only have so much Zoom time, so I have
Yeah.
to.
We'll still answer questions, so it won't be on Zoom. That's all.
Right.
Okay. So, thank you very much. So, and we have hosting Desiree Cooper. She'll be doing a story time. She's written a children's book. So that will be at 2:00. So, and of course, the author series has more. Ebony Liddell will be here. She wrote, Love Radio. She'll be at the Redford branch, on October 12th at 6:00. And, also there's a virtual program on Monday called Horror New York. That will, if you want to see that, that will be on, just take a look at our website and the link will be posted on the website. So again, thank you so much. Anita wants to say some thank you.
I just want to thank you, Detroit Public
Yeah.
Library. Thank you, Wayne State University for us, and a big Detroit thank you to the.
So thank you. I got to turn the.
All right, well, I can still answer questions,
Yeah.
because, before we get to that, I just want to make sure I get to people's questions, so that was important. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think he held, black Elites in a different light than himself?
Yes, I do love that question. I think the reason why I read this, the second chapter, that portion of the second chapter, where he talks about who are you, what you doing, where you at, you know. My father believed that the desire to achieve in a white environment where you were accepted and recognized, which is always very hard to get, kept a lot of times people from still connecting back to the community and the things that matter. I'm not saying that that is absolute, but I am saying that I understand that, as I mentioned earlier, the higher that you climb on that ladder, the less you can say. And my father never climbed anybody's ladder anywhere, so he did whatever he wanted all the time. And so it's not to say that he did not like, he had friends who, you know, he was highly educated. He, you know, he was part of a fraternity organization. I found that out much later in life. But, you know, he didn't prescribe to all of the kind of the activities and, you know, the events and kind of the social experience separate from everybody else. And in the book, you know, he mentions a lot about that, about kind of people, you know, kind of doing something else over here while people are hurting over here, and how easy it is to forget that you came from those same places. This character, Dan Freeman, comes from the ghetto of Chicago. My father was born in 1930 during the Depression in Chicago, in the Chicago slums, as he mentioned, as he calls it. Because at that time, that's exactly what it was. You know, and so he came from a place where he was hurting and in a lot of pain because he recognized the fact that he was experiencing America the way he was simply because of what he looked like. You know, he can function and operate on all levels. He was able to go to school and get a degree and all those other things. So what was different? He was a track star. He did it all. You know, he's the good son. So you hope your child will do all that, go to college, graduate, get a master's degree, go to the army, and, you know, all of the things that he did, that went on a track scholarship to the University of Wisconsin. Right. So he made his family very, very proud. But I think he felt like trying to move away from that. Initially, he wanted to be a lawyer. That was his dream at first. And he moved away from that desire to climb and wanted to stay in the community and do something that he knew would be, you know, dear to his heart. And that would really matter in the long run for him. I'm not saying that being an attorney doesn't matter. It certainly does. You can have incredible impact as an attorney, but he felt like that wasn't his assignment. So yeah, that's a great question. Anybody else have a question? I'm here from this before we stop. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I've never read the book,
Okay.
I've just heard of it all my life. I saw the movie though,
Mhm.
and I was wondering, did your father like the film based on the book, and did you feel like it got his message out? And also, what did you feel about it? And, did you ever find out if your, father was being watched by the FBI, given what he wrote? I'm assuming that he was,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's it.
The answer to the last part of your question is yes. Yeah, for sure. He definitely believed that, and I believe that strongly as well, that he was being watched, for sure. I mean, I think anytime you I know we you know, this is probably not, well, you turn the thing, okay. We're not on anymore. Okay. We sit back, okay, now let's talk, now